One of the most telling signs of limited cognitive development, and perhaps one of the most overlooked, is the persistent neglect of personal responsibility. It's easy to point fingers at the world, to blame circumstances, parents, society, or even fate for the state of our lives. But psychology has shown us time and again that this habit of externalizing blame is not just a sign of emotional immaturity, it's a marker of intellectual stagnation. When we refuse to take responsibility for our actions, our choices, and even our thoughts, we effectively hand over the steering wheel of our lives to forces outside ourselves. We become passive observers rather than active participants in our own stories. This isn't just a philosophical point, it's a deeply practical one. Studies in developmental psychology have consistently found that individuals who habitually avoid responsibility tend to struggle with problem solving, adaptability, and long-term planning. They're more likely to fall into patterns of learned helplessness, where they believe that nothing they do can change their situation. This belief, in turn, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't believe you have the power to change your life, you won't try. And if you don't try, nothing changes. It's a vicious cycle, and it's one that quietly erodes both intelligence and potential. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything that goes wrong. It means recognizing that regardless of what happens to you, you have a choice in how you respond. You have agency. You can decide to learn from your mistakes, to adapt, to grow. This is the foundation of resilience, and it's also the foundation of intelligence. People embrace responsibility are more likely to seek out new information, to challenge their own assumptions, and to persist in the face of setbacks. They don't see failure as a permanent state, but as a temporary obstacle, something to be understood, learned from, and ultimately overcome. Contrast this with the habit of blaming others. When you make a habit of saying, "It's not my fault," you're not just avoiding discomfort. You're shutting down the very processes that lead to growth. You're telling your brain, there's nothing to learn here. There's nothing I can do. Over time, this mindset calcifies. It becomes harder and harder to see opportunities for change because you've trained yourself to look for excuses instead. This isn't just a psychological quirk, it's a cognitive limitation. The more you practice avoiding responsibility, the less capable you become of critical thinking, creative problem solving, and meaningful self-improvement. It's important to recognize that this habit often starts small. Maybe it's blaming your alarm clock for being late, or your boss for your lack of motivation. Maybe it's blaming your partner for your unhappiness, or the government for your financial struggles. Each time you do this, you reinforce the idea that you are powerless, and the more powerless you feel, the less likely you are to take the kinds of actions that actually improve your life. This is why personal responsibility is so closely linked to intelligence. Not because smart people never make mistakes, but because they're willing to own those mistakes, to learn from them, and to do better next time. If you want to break free from the habits that hold you back, start by asking yourself, what part of this is within my control? It's a simple question, but it's a powerful one. It shifts your focus from what you can't do to what you can. It opens the door to growth, to learning, and to real lasting change. And in that moment, you reclaim the power to shape your own life. Another everyday habit that quietly reveals a lack of cognitive growth is the avoidance of honest self-reflection. It's a subtle thing, often masked by busyness or distraction, but its impact on our lives is profound. When we shy away from looking inward, when we refuse to examine our own beliefs, motivations, and mistakes, we cut ourselves off from one of the most powerful tools for personal development. Psychology has shown that self-reflection is not just a luxury for the introspective. It's a necessity for anyone who wants to grow, adapt, and thrive in a complex world. It's uncomfortable to look at ourselves honestly. It means confronting the parts of our character that we'd rather ignore. The moments when we acted out of fear or pride or laziness. It means admitting that we don't have all the answers, that we're capable of being wrong, and that sometimes our problems are of our own making. But this discomfort is precisely what makes self-reflection so valuable. It's in those moments of honest appraisal that we find the seeds of real change. Without them, we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes, to fall into the same patterns, and to wonder why nothing ever seems to improve. People who avoid self-reflection often do so because it threatens their sense of self. It's easier to maintain the illusion that we're always right, always justified, always the victim of circumstance. But this illusion comes at a cost. When we refuse to question ourselves, we stop learning. We become rigid in our thinking, unable to adapt to new information or changing circumstances. This rigidity is a hallmark of low cognitive flexibility, and it's been linked in psychological research to poor problem-solving skills, lower emotional intelligence, and even reduced overall intelligence. Honest self-reflection requires humility. It means being willing to ask, what if I'm wrong? Or what could I have done differently? It means being open to feedback, even when it stings. It means recognizing that growth is not a straight line, but a process of trial and error, of falling down and getting back up. This willingness to examine ourselves is what allows us to learn from our experiences, to adjust our course, and to become wiser over time. But in today's world, it's easier than ever to avoid self-reflection. We're surrounded by distractions, social media, entertainment, endless streams of information that keep us from sitting quietly with our own thoughts. We could fill every moment with noise, never giving ourselves the space to ask the hard questions. And when we do encounter discomfort, it's tempting to blame others or external circumstances rather than looking inward. But every time we do this, we miss an opportunity to grow. The truth is, self-reflection is not about self-criticism or wallowing in guilt. It's about understanding ourselves more deeply so that we can make better choices in the future. It's about recognizing our strengths as well as our weaknesses and using that knowledge to move forward. People who make a habit of honest self-reflection are more adaptable, more resilient, and more capable of navigating life's challenges. They're not afraid to admit when they're wrong because they know that every mistake is an opportunity to learn. If you find yourself resisting self-reflection, ask yourself what you're afraid to see. Often the things we avoid looking at are the very things that hold us back. By facing them head on, we reclaim our power to change. We become the authors of our own stories rather than passive characters swept along by circumstance. And in that act of courage, we open the door to greater wisdom, deeper understanding, and a more meaningful life. Another everyday habit that quietly undermines our intelligence is the tendency to seek instant gratification. It's a pattern that's become almost invisible in our fast-paced world, where everything from food to entertainment to social approval is available at the tap of a screen. But the habit of reaching for quick rewards rather than working patiently toward long-term goals is more than just a modern convenience. It's a psychological trap that limits our growth and potential. Psychological research has shown that the ability to delay gratification is one of the strongest predictors of success in life. The famous marshmallow test with children, for example, revealed that those who could resist the temptation of an immediate treat in favor of a larger reward later on tended to do better academically, socially, and even financially as adults. This isn't just about willpower. It's about the capacity to think ahead, to weigh consequences, and to make choices that serve our future selves rather than just our present desires. When we fall into the habit of seeking instant gratification, we train our brains to expect quick fixes. We become less willing to tolerate discomfort, less able to persist through challenges, and less likely to invest in the slow, sometimes tedious process of real achievement. Whether it's scrolling endlessly through social media for a hit of dopamine, reaching for junk food instead of preparing a healthy meal, or procrastinating on important tasks in favor of fleeting pleasures, these choices add up. Over time, they erode our discipline, our focus, and our ability to pursue meaningful goals. The problem with instant gratification is that it offers only temporary satisfaction. The pleasure fades quickly, leaving us hungry for the next quick fix. This cycle can become addictive, making it harder and harder to break free. We start to avoid anything that requires effort or patience, and our capacity for deep work and sustained attention diminishes. This isn't just a matter of personal preference. It's a cognitive limitation that affects our ability to learn, to solve problems, and to create lasting value in our lives. It's important to recognize that the world is designed to exploit this weakness. Companies spend billions of dollars engineering products and experiences that capture our attention and keep us coming back for more. Social media platforms, fast food chains, and streaming services all thrive on our desire for immediate pleasure. But just because something is easy or enjoyable in the moment doesn't mean it's good for us in the long run, doesn't mean it's good for us in the long run. In fact, the most meaningful achievements in life, whether it's building a career, nurturing a relationship, or mastering a skill, require patience, persistence, and the willingness to endure discomfort. Choosing to delay gratification is an act of self-respect. It's a way of honoring your future self, of investing in the person you want to become, rather than settling for the easiest option right now. It means saying no to distractions, no to shortcuts, and no to the seductive pull of immediate pleasure when it stands in the way of something greater. This isn't about denying yourself joy or pleasure. It's about choosing the kind of joy that lasts, the kind that comes from real accomplishment and growth. If you notice yourself falling into the trap of instant gratification, pause and ask yourself what you're really seeking. Is it comfort, escape, validation? Often the things we chase in the moment are poor substitutes for the deeper fulfillment that comes from working towards something meaningful. By learning to tolerate discomfort, to wait, and to work patiently toward your goals, you build not just discipline but intelligence, the kind of intelligence that shapes a life worth living. A habit that quietly reveals a lack of intellectual growth, and one that is especially common in our polarized world, is the rejection of new ideas and perspectives. It's easy to surround ourselves with people who think like we do, to consume information that confirms what we already believe, and to dismiss anything that challenges our worldview. But psychology tells us that this kind of mental rigidity is a barrier to learning, creativity, and genuine understanding. When we close ourselves off to new perspectives, we limit not only our knowledge, but also our capacity to adapt and thrive in a changing world. Openness to experience is one of the strongest predictors of cognitive ability. It's not about agreeing with every new idea that comes your way, but about being willing to consider it, to weigh it thoughtfully, and to ask yourself whether there might be something valuable in it, even if it makes you uncomfortable. Growth, both intellectual and personal, often begins at the edge of our comfort zones. When we encounter something unfamiliar or challenging, our first instinct might be to reject it, to defend our existing beliefs, or to retreat into the safety of what we know. But if we always follow that instinct, we miss out on opportunities to expand our understanding and to see the world in richer, more nuanced ways. It's important to recognize that none of us has a monopoly on truth. Our perspectives are shaped by our upbringing, our culture, our experiences, and our biases. No matter how intelligent or educated we are, there will always be gaps in our knowledge and blind spots in our thinking. The willingness to admit this, to say, I might be wrong, or I have something to learn here, is a sign of true intelligence. It's a sign of humility, curiosity, and the courage to grow. Rejecting new ideas doesn't just limit our own growth, it also impoverishes our relationships and our communities. When we refuse to listen to others, we shut down dialogue and create divisions. We miss the chance to learn from people with different backgrounds, experiences, and insights. This kind of intellectual isolation can lead to stagnation, both individually and collectively. Societies that encourage open debate, critical thinking, and the free exchange of ideas tend to be more innovative, resilient, and adaptable. The same is true for individuals. Of course, being open to new perspectives doesn't mean abandoning your values or beliefs at the first sign of disagreement. It means being willing to engage with ideas that challenge you, to ask questions, and to seek understanding rather than simply defending your position. It means recognizing that disagreement is not a threat, but an opportunity for growth. When we listen to others with genuine curiosity, we often discover that our own views become richer and more nuanced. We may not change our minds, but we gain a deeper understanding of why we believe what we do and why others see things differently. In a world that often rewards certainty and punishes doubt, it takes courage to remain open. It's tempting to retreat into echo chambers, to seek out only those voices that reinforce our own. But real growth happens when we step outside those boundaries, when we allow ourselves to be challenged, and when we remain curious in the face of uncertainty. This is not always comfortable, but it is essential for anyone who wants to keep learning, adapting, and moving forward. If you find yourself instinctively rejecting new ideas or perspectives, pause and ask yourself what you might be missing. That G, consider the possibility that there is something valuable to learn even from those you disagree with. By cultivating openness, you not only expand your own mind, but also contribute to a culture of understanding, dialogue, and progress. There's another habit that quietly reveals a lack of intellectual maturity, and it's one that can be especially insidious because it often masquerades as wisdom or realism. I'm talking about the tendency to engage in chronic complaining and cynicism. It's easy to fall into the trap of seeing the world through a negative lens, to focus on what's wrong, to point out flaws, and to assume the worst in people and situations. On the surface, this might seem like a sign of intelligence, after all. It takes a sharp mind to notice problems. But psychology tells us that chronic negativity is less about insight and more about a failure to engage constructively with the world. When complaining becomes a habit, it shapes the way we see ourselves in our circumstances. Instead of looking for solutions, we become experts at identifying obstacles. Instead of taking action, we become spectators, convinced that nothing can change and that our efforts are pointless. This mindset is not only disempowering, but it also limits our ability to think creatively and solve problems. The more we complain, the more we reinforce a sense of helplessness, and the less likely we are to take the kinds of risks and initiatives that lead to growth. Cynicism, too, can feel like a shield against disappointment. If you expect the worst, you can't be let down. But this protective stance comes at a high cost. Cynical people often miss out on opportunities because they assume nothing will work out. They dismiss new ideas before giving them a chance. And they're quick to criticize others' efforts without offering alternatives. Over time, this attitude can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe that nothing good can happen, you stop trying to make good things happen. You become stuck, not because the world is against you, but because you've convinced yourself that it's not worth the effort to try. What's more, chronic complaining and cynicism are contagious. They can spread through families, workplaces, and communities, creating an environment where negativity is the norm and hope is in short supply. This doesn't just affect morale, it affects performance, creativity, and even health. That studies have shown that people who focus on the negative are more likely to experience stress, anxiety, and depression. They're also less likely to form strong, supportive relationships because constant negativity pushes others away. But perhaps the most important reason to break the habit of chronic complaining and cynicism is that it robs us of agency. When we focus only on what's wrong, we overlook what's possible. We forget that we have the power to make changes, however small, that can improve our lives and the lives of those around us. Constructive action, not endless criticism, is what moves us forward. It's easy to point out problems. It's much harder and much more valuable to work toward solutions. This doesn't mean ignoring real issues or pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. It means choosing to engage with challenges in a way that is proactive rather than passive, hopeful rather than hopeless. It means asking, what can I do about this? Instead of simply complaining about how bad things are. That it means being willing to take responsibility for your own attitude and actions, even when circumstances are difficult. If you notice yourself slipping into patterns of chronic complaining or cynicism, pause and consider what you might be able to change, even in a small way. Look for opportunities to contribute, to help, to make a difference. By shifting your focus from criticism to constructive action, you not only improve your own outlook, but you also inspire those around you to do the same.